go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sector. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts. And of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Lei. I am the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, happy Thanksgiving. Good afternoon. Can you please introduce yourself?
Happy Thanksgiving. Happy World Cup. Good afternoon. This is Lei Xing, your co-host, former chief editor of China Auto Review. And this is episode number 93. I just wanted to make sure I get the number right.
It's a lot of numbers, man. A lot of pods.
You've been watching lots of World Cup, I guess?
Unfortunately, I did not get to peek at the Japan game today. I peeked at the France-Australia game when Australia was winning for about 5 minutes, the first 5 minutes, and then France woke up. But I saw the 1-1 draw with Wales. And, you know, we have that private chat group that has a bunch of Brits in it. So the Three Lions will be crying on Friday, I think. So,
well, I mean, you and I being, you're Vietnamese American, I'm Chinese American. So you and I being Asians,
yes,
we're all, you know, pretty fired up. Saudi Arabia and Japan, rooting for Korea tomorrow.
Yes, it is.
So Asian pride.
Yeah, it's about time, right? Because I think it is very cool to see someone your skin tone and achieving great things, whether it's on a pitch, whether it's, you know, in a boardroom, whatever. So
whether it's in the EVs.
yes.
Anyways, you know the joke about Qatar, the World Cup, is from the Chinese point of view, is the only Chinese factor that's not in Qatar is the Chinese national men's team. Everything else, there's some Chinese factor involved, right? The stadiums are built.
Yes.
And the buses that are running there, Yutong and Haiger, they're all Chinese brand buses. There's Dongfeng Aeolus cars running over there.
Right.
There's a Chinese referee, I believe, is going to officiate one of the games. So, but sadly, and, you know, we've been talking about World Cup, but World Cup has magnified what is going on in China right now. Big time.
Good and bad.
And so the last couple of days, you know, it's really gotten to a head, right? Of, you know, people.
Well, we've seen videos of what's going on at Foxconn. So I think Foxconn and Apple are going to have some explaining to do. There's a lot of videos being floated around the internet that are heartbreaking and pretty serious. And it goes to show that zero COVID is not going to go away anytime soon in China. And the current cities, and you add to this, Lei, the current 2 cities that seem pretty serious with infections is Beijing and Chongqing. So those are the 2 cities I hear about the most. Have you heard of any others that are in either virtual lockdown or
Guangzhou.
Very limited? Yeah, Guangzhou. Yeah.
Guangzhou. I mean, these are all huge automotive hubs, the 3 cities that we mentioned.
So Beijing has Beijing Automotive, it has Li Auto, it has a Hyundai, no, not a Hyundai plant anymore.
Mercedes.
And Chongqing is where Chang'an is, so Ford is there, Chang'an Motors is there. And yeah, I think we can't emphasize enough that all of these places are important automotive hubs for the Chinese automotive sector. So
yeah, and you know the China New International Exhibition Center outside of Beijing, where the Beijing Auto Show is held, is now a Fangcang makeshift hospital.
Yeah, a quarantine center,
right? And I've seen some videos and photos of the scene there, and it's
so for our American listeners, it is like the exterior of an RV. So it's like aluminum little single wide, and there is a bed, a very not comfortable bed. There is a sink, and there is a toilet. No shower in a lot of these fangtangs, and yeah, you quarantine in there for 3 and 7 days, depending on your testing and where you're from, because your QR code could pop at any time. So
I mean, you were in Beijing during the Shanghai lockdowns, and it feels like this time it's gotten even worse from the perspective of people being fed up. I get that feeling. I mean, you went through, how it was like in China, and now seeing this at this point in time, especially with the World Cup, uh, the 32 people from 32 countries traveling to Qatar, and right, that just, I think people are really angry.
So I was being told, and I don't know if this is true or not. Like you tell me, because you surf the China internet pretty regularly. I was told that a lot of the pictures from Qatar for the World Cup, the crowds were being blurred out in order to not show them
I don't
not
know.
wearing masks. So I don't know if that was true or not, but that's what I was told.
No, yeah. I mean, I think last few days it's just a little bit sick to the stomach, just to see the kind of sentiment and
And I'm actually very relieved that it isn't Shanghai. The Chinese government has implemented the like surgical lockdown where they're locking down at a building level, and unfortunately, the COVID is still, what's the right word for it? It's still being transmitted all over the country, and
right.
I was told that every province has a number of cases. So not one province, not one of
No.
the 31 or 30 provinces is left untouched.
So this I mean, a week or a couple of weeks ago, or less than a month ago, right? We were talking about prospects of, this year I said it was foregone conclusion, but right, these things happen, and then you think, we're less than a week from December, and how this is going to affect the final numbers. I think it'll still remain strong, but going into 2023, this is kind of foreshadowing that some of the companies are going to face difficult situation. Case in point, WM Motor
they're teetering.
reducing their salaries and all that, right? That internal letter from Freeman.
Which is still unbelievable to me, because I know you and I felt the same way early on in the process, that WM was going to be one of the survivors.
I'm not so sure now.
And that's a shame, because most of my contacts and friends have left, but I made some decent friends there, and so it's a shame for them to not be able to keep up with everyone else in every other company. So
Yeah, I mean, the feel like that year is ending on a down uh, note.
well, in China at least, right? Because I feel, from someone who has been in the United States for the last 3 months now, I feel pretty lucky, and feel that
Likewise.
this Thanksgiving is extra special.
Yes.
And we'll talk about it, because I'd like
Yeah.
to talk about it at the end real quick, for 30
Yeah.
seconds.
Yeah. Sure.
So on to the news. What do you want to talk about? You update us.
Well, probably the most talked about thing right now is the BYD raising prices, in contrast to Tesla rumored but denied reducing prices again. I think there's some debate on that front. My personal view is, whatever BYD or anybody else does, Tesla is going to have to find its way on its own. I mean, it doesn't really matter if others increase prices. And it, like we said, in the past, not going to be surprised at all if Tesla reduces price again, because they still have that card to play.
But it's not as effective. So it's not.
No, it hasn't been.
So they need to play defense for as long as they can until some reinforcements come. And as far as we know, there aren't going to be any reinforcements coming for the foreseeable future. So
And kind of with, Elon, all his attention on Twitter. Luckily, we can still do this on Twitter Spaces. So, thank you, Elon.
it's working
Yeah,
for now.
it's working for now. So we still have a platform. Thanksgiving, we're all being thankful for everything, right? So
There are a few people that we follow that are already like putting alternate. I don't even know what they're called. The like
Mastodon post or
Mastodon,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I had never even heard of Mastodon until 2 weeks ago. So
yeah, yeah. So,
and if it wasn't for BYD's really insignificant price increase, right? It wasn't, it's 6,000 RMB. So it would be their rumored sodium ion battery, right?
yeah, it's. I mean, it's nothing less than what, $1,000, right?
Yeah, they're literally just passing on the cost to the consumer. They're not gaining any margin with that price increase, right? So
Right, right. So, and then the sodium ion. I think that the fine print is. I think they're going to do it, just like CATL. Just a matter of timing and limited or mass quantity production. That's the difference.
so for people that aren't that familiar with batteries, to not to oversimplify this, but sodium ion takes the lithium out of the battery, but it is even less effective on range. So it's cheaper, but it's going to be not as long of a range as an LFP and definitely not as an NCM. And so, where you would see this is likely vehicles that are less than 200,000 RMB, where I think the expectations are a little bit lower on range.
Right, and BYD does not have a demand problem right now, so I don't think the price increase is gonna dent their sales in any significant way.
It's against the backdrop of all of these subsidies, not all of them, but the two or three subsidies potentially going away.
Yeah,
So, whereas everyone is looking to zig because their vehicles and products will be more expensive come January 1st, 2023, BYD is like, okay, I got to pass these costs onto you. And they seem very careful of not really making the price delta something that would alarm the customer.
I mean, I still expect a surge because of this subsidies going away, but again, we repeat, EVs are becoming Vs.
For BYD, they are Vs, so
Right,
they stopped making they stopped making them, right?
right. So I think it's become a pure market driven, not pure, but majority market driven market anyways. So I don't expect this kind of price increase to have any, major impact.
Let's deep dive a little bit on the BYD though, because in Europe, in Australia, in parts of Southeast Asia, I think,
Morocco? Did they
oh,
just get
yeah,
into Morocco?
yes,
That's the
they found an
latest.
agent. They found an agent.
Brazil,
Yeah.
Morocco.
So this is where BYD lives. They live in the under 150,000 RMB price point, the $25,000 price point. So no one can touch them there. And they have two BEVs currently, the Chin and the Dolphin, that are under 150,000 in China. And they will have the Seagull
Right,
starting next year.
right.
So there will be three products that are going to be their high runners in China. They're going to be more expensive than 22,000 outside of China, but if you can sell most of your capacity domestically and then sell some of your higher margin stuff abroad, that's a great strategy.
Yeah.
And the sub 100,000 or 100,000 RMB price point for BEVs in China this year is 36.8% of the market. So it's a high volume bunch of vehicles that are sold. So again, BYD is charting at around 3.8 million units in annual capacity. So if 30% of their capacity is like sold for sure into China, this gives them a ton of flexibility in other places.
Right, and I believe they also have a 300,000 unit capacity plant coming online at the end of this month in Jinan, if I remember correctly. So they're
Right.
still increasing that capacity. And speaking of overseas, right? Overseas, so they just got their Australian NCAP 5-star for the Atto 3. Remember, there were some issues with the rear seat,
Yep. The harness.
but it looks like, I mean, they got the 5-star so for the Atto 3, so that cements them, I guess. The
Quick
only thing I was
fix.
gonna say is that European play of the 72,000 euro Tang and Han. We'll see how that plays out because that's pretty expensive.
Especially when you compare it to Neo, who just announced their pricing.
Right. So that's an interesting competition among the China EV Inc. outside of China playing out.
And Neo would much rather be aligned and compared to a Mercedes and a BMW than a BYD, Han, or a Tang in Europe. I assure you
Yes,
that.
sure.
Want to talk GM?
GM, about time. Just, I think we were looking sort of at a Volkswagen-esque type of announcement. We're just gonna spend. Shanghai GM is investing 70 billion renminbi, which is basically $10 billion over the next, well, by 2025, so over the next 3 years on electrification and digitalization and autonomous driving, all that.
So they just converted a factory in Wuhan, I believe, that is
Yep,
now only building
Ultium.
Ultium platform, which is their battery, their BEV platform. And the first product is actually being built in Shanghai. It's the Cadillac Lyric. And they will be building most of those other ones out of Wuhan and out of that Cadillac factory in Shanghai. And so you wonder when that was going to happen. And it did. 10 products. That's a blitz. That's called a blitz within the next 2 years, effectively, right?
Yeah.
So this raises some really, really interesting dynamic between, well, let me say this. Let me finish my thought real quick.
Yep.
Because GM has now doubled down on China, and they also need to grow like crazy in the US. And if the US government is very tough on China, how is that going to play for GM, who's going to be launching 10 cars in 2 years effectively?
Yeah, GM, unlike the other foreign legacies, they really have two markets only in the world: North America and China, basically. Everywhere else, it's right, it's insignificant.
Because remember that they sold Opel to
Stellantis, yeah,
Stellantis. And so they're not doing anything in Germany effectively, except for commercial vehicles, I think.
yeah, and one thing pointed out is that they're gonna launch the so-called SDV platform. We were talking about that Motor Trend's Coding the Car book and documentary, and this Craig Carlson, the former VP of software for Tesla, I think he said something very interesting. Was all these companies' legacies, they have 500 thousands of people in their software team. We had Tesla we had 50 people at the very beginning and got that right. And he said that's not going to work. That was interesting. So, and now GM has a team of 1,300 people in software and digitalization. So, good luck. That they're in the same boat as Volkswagen, I think, as far as
I'm going to be a homer. I'm going to put my USA hat on, and I just think
USA.
I just think that GM has a much easier go of it, at least in the United States, because of its proximity to Silicon Valley, to Pittsburgh, to Boston. Whereas Germany, there is no technology Silicon Valley in Europe, right? The closest thing to any startup community to have is Berlin. But Berlin is not in and of itself very large from a innovation and venture capital investment standpoint in the grand scheme of things. And then the next largest hub is London in Europe. Okay. And so it's just going to be much tougher to find decent coders in Europe than it is in the United States. And it's already hard in the US. So
And on the volume side, these legacy foreign automakers in China, there's not one company, there's not one that has a model that, what do you say, that moves the needle. Not single one. You look at all of those out there. They have tons of models, EVs on sale, but there's not a Model Y or one model that really sells. And Lyric has not. I mean, it's slow ramping up, but
the Mach-E either, right?
right.
Remember that tweet I sent earlier this week where the Audi dealer in Chinese wrote, "We have EVs here," out of his window.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I tweeted, "Thanks, but no thanks, Audi. Where's the Neo House?" So it is mind-boggling, but you hope that at least GM has looked at the ID4, ID3, how it's performed, what the challenges are for those vehicles in China, and are pulling up features into their 10 vehicles that they're launching, or 15 vehicles.
To take a analogy of the LiDAR competition from Dr. Junpei, that they're into this execution phase. I think for these foreign companies, they're still in that validation phase because they're still investing, they're still building these plants. Audi, right? Audi, they just had their roofing for the Audi FAW and EV, and that won't come online until 2024. So I think these foreign legacy, they are really banking again on the second half of this decade. So the first half of this decade is going to be owned by the Chinese and Tesla.
And I think it's really hard. I think 3 years ago, it was okay to assume that they could play defense for several years and then starting in 2027, start to build that volume of EV sales in China, the United States, and Europe. But with how EV adoption has really been pulled forward, I see a few legacy brands that you and I have known since childhood maybe going away in the next 5 or 7 years.
Not surprising if they do. We're kind of rooting for the US, almost, right? to do well.
But I'm a little bit torn because I want to see a lot of innovative stuff. I want not drag down, knockout competition between the tech companies and the legacies, but I just don't know if the legacies can go blow by blow, blow for blow with the tech companies.
Yeah, and to be honest, I want Tesla to do well in China and elsewhere. But
they have to do well.
Yeah,
if they don't, the whole sector is going to pay for it.
But the competition is right. That's what it is.
So every beauty queen has some warts, is basically what you're telling me.
Yes, kind of. Yeah. So
and then we're only talking about product and OEM. We haven't even talked about batteries. We haven't even talked about chips.
No,
we haven't even talked about data.
No.
We haven't talked about, because GM and Volkswagen for sure are looking at playing 3D chess with the diplomacy issues, with the subsidy issues in the United States, we need to make sure that we maintain good relations with the Chinese government in order for these 15 vehicles to have a chance at the China market. And if I was GM and I was Mary, I'd be staying up at night trying to line up each of those products with who I believe which brand, which Chinese domestic brand, and which specific product of that Chinese domestic brand I would be competing with, and then doing some competitive analysis to really, really make sure that each of my products stands out in some sort of way.
Yeah.
So it is, China is a different animal than the United States and Europe, but I think Europe is the first region that will feel the pressure from China EV Inc. Great Wall has said now that they are getting to, which markets do they enter in Europe? I forget, but
well, they just shipped a batch of the coffee 01 PHEVs to Europe. So
That's right. So they are officially selling into Europe now. So and you also wanted to talk about the 100,000 units from Polestar.
yeah, and that's produced at the Luqiao. Luqiao. I mean, all of their vehicles are produced in China,
Yes.
which is it's and sold in what 27 markets now. Was it
Yes.
25 or 27 markets now? So
So
kudos to China manufacturing.
so the yeah, kudos to the manufacturing side. I'm going to, I think they tried to market that as a win. The Polestar 2 has been selling since, let's say, or delivered since June 2019. And so that's about 40 months. And that means that they've averaged around 2.5 thousand units per month. Not great. And we know that they don't sell well in the US, and we know they don't sell well in China. So that 100,000 units is mostly for Europe. And it's a new brand. I can't call it a startup. It's not really a startup to me. It's not ground up startup. So if you look at it at the 2,500 per month, a little disappointing, I would say. But of course, they're not wanting you to focus on that part. Let's see what happens with the much more expensive Polestar 3.
Moving on to Baidu a little bit,
Let's do it.
robotaxi.
Congratulations to them. I think they're doing well.
So both Baidu and Pony got their. This is interesting. The driverless permit with backseat safety drivers. So no safety drivers in the front, drivers or passenger, but safety driver in the back. So it's baby step until you get rid of the entire the safety
So
driver.
this
Right?
is what's the Beijing government is considered phase 2.
Phase 2,
So
yeah. So that's
phase 1 was
interesting.
safety driver in the front.
Development.
Phase 2, safety driver in the back. Phase 3 is no safety driver. So
Yeah.
think cruise last week with Lei and I.
Yeah. And then Apollo Go, they did 474,000 rides in Q3. So I think Robin said, that they're perennially the biggest, kind of the robotaxi ride hailing in the world. Right,
1.4 million rides since inception, covering about 36 million kilometers or 22.37 million miles.
Right.
So,
but one thing he mentioned was that they're not. There's also, besides the robotaxi, there's also the autonomous driving, AMP, all that, AVP. And he said they're not going to have any meaningful revenues on that side, I think, until 2024. So that's one thing to point out. And the other thing is
real quick, those are hardware software stacks that they're trying to sell to OEMs.
Yeah, and the other thing is the Jidu Robo 1 will be the first model to use Baidu's AMP 3.0, which is kind of the equivalent to the city driving assistance, city NGP. So, there you have it. They're banking on that.
And Frank already told us to expect some surprises out of that Robo 1. So we're looking forward to seeing what else they attach to the launch of that vehicle. So
yeah.
And I have to mention this because, a friend of China EVs and More, he tweeted about a podcast. He interviewed someone about their transcendent robotaxi ride in San Francisco. And so I had to retweet or respond, hey, if you want to know about my transcendent rides in SF, in Beijing, and in Guangzhou, you can invite me on the pod. So, I think it's great that people are able to use the robotaxis in the United States. But if we're talking global competition, you got to get into these cars globally, right? So, anyways.
Yeah. So still kind of processing that ride, which was I don't know if it's transcendent, but it was.
It was. It made me. I think we said it last week. It made us hopeful.
Hopeful.
So again, we'll have to go back to SF. Hopefully, Alfred in the next month or so, month or two, maybe right after Christmas, and visit you so you can take us out to eat, and we can do the Waymo one and the cruise one again during the
Yeah,
day
yeah,
in the
yeah.
daytime. In the
Because
daytime.
we've seen some social posts of people riding the Waymo.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the other thing I wanted to point out was the Formula One Shanghai GP looks like it will be canceled, which doesn't bode well for the Shanghai Auto Show.
It does not.
Uh, we we were all looking forward to Shanghai Auto Show, and now it's up in the air. I still think at this point, it should be able to be held because the logistics are completely different with the auto show compared to a Formula One race.
But the disappointing thing, Lay, is that it might be for an in a domestic audience rather than a foreign audience,
Yeah, yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah.
So
So
if it's like whack-a-mole like it is right now, which it very well could be in come March and April of next year in China, I'm not sure I'll want to go through all that stuff, even if I was to stay for 3 weeks, because the whole point of going back would be to go visit our friends, to go visit these companies that we've been talking to for
yeah,
forever, and they're all not in Shanghai, by the way.
I just wish this is a turning point. We'll see, but
On Twitter, they're saying that we have these arbitrary government meetings, like the two meetings in early 2023. That might be the turning point. And somebody had kind of questioned, why do we believe that these opening dates revolve around these government meetings? And so they made sense. It's just kind of random. Everyone's just guessing. So what I did want to talk about was the pricing for the ET5, the ET7, and the EL7, also known in China as the ES7, the new large SUV from NIO. We're looking at battery lease price of 61,900 euro for the ET5. It seems a little heavy. That pricing seems a little high. The ET7 is
well,
81,900 euro.
I mean the positioning is there, right?
Yeah,
That's I mean, I compared to a 72,000 BYD.
yeah, that. But I actually think the ET5 slots between the 3 and 5 for BMW, and the C and the E. Am I wrong? I think it's a little bigger than a C, and it matches the footprint of an E, I think. And so I think it leans more E in 5 series than C in 3 series. But what do you think?
I mean, it's 3 Series C. I mean, that's what I see it as. It's a
Yeah,
right
okay.
baby Benz. That's what it's right positioned. But the thing is, we can't expect big volumes anyways, because they have to address the domestic demand, and we're all looking forward to see what kind of numbers we're gonna get in November and December. And I think Edison's team threw out some numbers, 13,000 in November and close to 19,000 in December.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't expect. I mean, they've shipped the what some of the models to Europe, but it's in the hundreds, right?
Yeah, those initial units were more for just marketing and awareness than any significant sales. But
Well, I think the fact of the matter is they've been flexible enough to respond quickly to what the user want. So, and then we figure out the next steps, I guess. The demand is.
the other challenge would be if supply chain due to COVID and lockdowns continue to be a major issue and they have limited production, they'll probably send it all to China, keep it
Yeah,
in China.
at this point, it doesn't look good going forward, looking forward to the next few weeks because of, I mean, what, half of China is almost on soft lockdowns or something. I mean, that's what you feel, right?
Yes.
So, we're going to see these production get affected, and people not being able to go out and right to take delivery. That's another thing.
Yeah, because that's one thing. We talk about production numbers, but if people can't go out and buy the cars, then what's the point?
Yeah, that's why
So
I hope this is a turning point. That some things can be changed for the better, but
I just don't see it well into 23. I just think, yeah, it
you know
is.
my prediction on the 6.8 billion. I did have the caveat. I did have the asterisk, barring any major disruptions, which we're seeing kind of right now.
2 weeks ago, that asterisk was pretty small, but now it's like magnified.
Yeah. So,
So, anyways,
but that's all I have.
let me see.
You wanted to talk about Thanksgiving a little bit, or what was?
Yeah, so let's open the room up for anyone who wants to chat or has anything to say. Love to have any discussions that you guys want to talk about. But I wanted to take a minute because, as an immigrant who's American, Thanksgiving was always super special for me. And so I wanted to kind of take a second to tell everyone what I'm thankful for. First of all, I'm thankful for you, Lei, for being my
Hey,
friend.
you read my mind, man. I was gonna say the same thing about you.
And yeah, so I think we keep each other honest. I think we are both pretty knowledgeable, probably two of the most knowledgeable people, and I think that we do a good job of covering a broad scope of what's out there. But most of all, I value your friendship and your wisdom and knowledge. And then, the second thing is I'm thankful for being together with my family here
Oh yeah,
in the United
that's
States after kind of seeing the last few days on Twitter and talking to my friends and stuff. My ritual for the last 4 or 5 years has been to, on Thursday, go to Jing'e in Beijing with one of the founders and have Thanksgiving with Christian Lee and have Thanksgiving dinner with him. He's Canadian, and so we just kind of made it a tradition over like 5 or 6 years because I have kids and it's important to really celebrate these holidays. And then on Saturdays we would have like a proper Thanksgiving with our friends and stuff. And
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah,
unfortunately, I don't think my friends in Beijing and in Shanghai are going to be able to get together like that. And so
yeah,
it saddens me because I know that as Americans living abroad, Thanksgiving was always kind of like the American holiday that everyone was invited, not just Americans. Okay. And so it's unfortunate if they're not going to be able to get together on Saturday. But so that's all I wanted to say. And third of all, I'm thankful that we're still able to do this podcast and that people are interested in what we have to say. I think we try to do as good of a job as we can. And the support that you guys are giving us and showing us is awesome. So we appreciate that as well.
yeah. I mean, you've said what I wanted to say pretty much. Just thankful for having this platform and the fact that the industry, the global industry, is going through the changes that are affording us to talk about those kind of changes. Otherwise, it'll be dull, right? But it's not. And you throw everything in there: the COVID, China, supply chain, the transformations, and the events and the people that we get to go and see. Right? We're really thankful for that. Kind of. I mean, living over here, it's right. It's pretty much back to normal.
This will be the first Thanksgiving in 14 years since I've been
Wow.
in the United States.
Are you having turkey?
Of course, yes, sir.
We don't usually have turkey. I remember in China at least, and the last couple of years here, usually we have dumplings. Believe
Hmm.
it or not, because like Thanksgiving is almost like Chinese New Year
Right,
for
right, right.
Americans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where families get together once a year.
Yep.
So we don't usually eat turkey, but at least I'm thankful that I have family here and
Yeah,
yeah,
man.
yeah. So
And I'm going to pat myself on the back for another 15 seconds here because I posted on LinkedIn what my thoughts were on the Coding the Car documentary. I thought it was great. Peculiarly, there weren't any technology folks. I think I mentioned that last week, but it reminded me of an article I wrote 4 years ago that I think
Yes, great article.
resonates. And it just scratches the surface, right? It's just kind of
Yeah.
just a broad overview, but I think it still rings true. So for anyone that wants to read that article, it was an article I wrote for, I hate saying thought leadership, but I guess if anything were a thought leadership piece, it would be that. But it was just kind of an opinion piece or an article that I'd written for American Chamber of Commerce in Beijing for their magazine. And, watching Coding the Car, I was like, wow, we are behind in the US. We are super behind in the US. So,
I think that book I've been reading in the last few days is actually better than the documentary because it has a lot more comments from these people that were interviewed,
right.
and to see the perspectives from these legacy executives, and especially that guy from Tesla, is you can see the kind of where the gap is on software. So
And the one thing I would favor over listening to the GM folks or the Ford folks or the Volkswagen folks or the Mercedes folks is listen to the Rivian folks, listen to the Lucid folks that are technology first, and then the auto part is the supporting cast as opposed to the main character. And I think that'll give you a much better idea of how far the legacies really need to go, because we're talking about the product generally being the exact same, right? It's four wheels and a car, but how Lucid and Rivian approach it versus how a GM, a Mercedes, or a Volkswagen approaches it is still completely different.
And that's why, going back to our conversation earlier, is now we're seeing GM talk about this SDV, where we're seeing Volkswagen banking, although delayed, but banking on this SSP platform, and others, right? Mercedes, with the expectation that they will get software right this time. Is that going to happen? Well, we'll see.
One of the caveats that I had was that in a digital world, things move faster. And so the slower you are, the farther behind you get. You don't, you can't just keep pace and then stay behind the same distance. You're going to get lapped if you don't get it right quickly. And the other important part to really, really differentiate digital from traditional automotive is an iterative process. I think it's not just that the software gets thrown out there and then that's it, because what Apple does so well, what Google does so well, what Amazon does so well is while you're sleeping, it sends out patches that you don't even know have fixed bugs that have only happened to X% of users of the iPhone, right? And you don't even know it, right? And 2 weeks ago, what's his name? DeLuca was like, oh, yeah, these vehicles are going to have OTA capability. What? This is not news, guys. So, anyways, if there are no questions, man, I'm good. I'm good to go.
Yeah, same here. And next week, our next episode will be on December 1st. And you know what happens on the 1st of every month.
And
we talk
you know
about
what?
sales.
So I also wanted to, and I'm taking this job from you today, anyways. Housekeeping. Lei and I will be part of a Climate Transform conference on December 7th. More details to follow, but it's going to be a look at 2023. And so it's going to be pretty exciting because we're not going to take a China look at it. We're going to take a global look.
The crystal ball is pretty cloudy right now. Pretty.
And I'm going to propose something to Lei, because last year we had a great idea that we never executed on. And maybe we're going to have some special awards in the coming weeks for a few of the vehicles or a few of the brands. And we'll share that hopefully by the first episode of January.
Yeah, that's another.
Should be fun though.
Yeah,
it'll be fun for us. It'll
another
be
job for us.
Yes, but it'll be fun. Anyway, so for anyone and everyone that celebrates Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving, happy long weekend. Thanks again for listening. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
And likewise, happy Thanksgiving. We're all very thankful for everything. And talk to you guys next week, next Thursday. Bye-bye.
Peace. That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu and Lei, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.